The Diamond, a place where legends are born, where hitters drop 400-foot bombs, where pitchers throw heat. The home of peaches, yard goats, trash pandas, and sod poodles. This is Ballpark Nation, your home for baseball from sea to shining sea. Now your host, the guy who could never crack his high school starting lineup, Jim Christopher.
And welcome everyone to Ballpark Nation. I'm your host, Jim Christopher, and thanks for hopping into the old bullpen cart and coming along with us. I grew up a massive baseball fan for all of my life, and after my 7-year Army stint, I thought, what better way to introduce myself to the country than through baseball? You see, baseball, unlike most other sports, is played at a high level from the biggest of cities to the smallest of towns, in the majors, the minor leagues, the independent leagues, and collegiate summer leagues. Almost every town has a local nine, and with those ball players comes all the great things that baseball has to offer. A sense of community, identity, belonging. All of that comes from sitting down one of the baselines and cheering your heroes. There's a reason why I call it the greatest game ever invented. So when we were putting this show together, we had to decide what ballparks to visit and which one to visit first. And we needed something iconic, something to get us off to a good start, to really jump in there. And what is more iconic than the 110-year-old bastion of baseball in Chicago, Wrigley Field? You see, people know Wrigley. People that aren't even baseball fans know Wrigley Field. In part because it's so much a part of our culture that it's been featured in pop culture, movies, and TV that have nothing to do with baseball feature Wrigley Field. From John Candy using it as his bedroom light connected to the clapper in Uncle Buck, to the Blues Brothers, to Ferris Bueller's Famous Day Off, to a shot of Balky and Cousin Larry coming out of Wrigley Field in the opening of Perfect Strangers. Yeah, that's a deep dive. The home of Chicago's local nine is woven into the very fabric of American culture. So come with us as we take a jaunt to one of baseball's most supreme cathedrals, Wrigley Field. We can't wait to hang out with you and check out the ivy, the brick, and so much more. Our first jaunt into a Major League ballpark is Wrigley Field, the iconic home to the Chicago Cubs and at one point, the Chicago Whales. This is why when you visit a ballpark, everyone, you've got to take a tour because there's so much more to a ballpark than seats and a net and beer and baseball that happens in the middle of what you're watching. So by all means, you should take a tour because in the case of Wrigley Field, there's well over 100 years of history that you can learn about while walking through this beautiful ballpark. And beautiful ballpark it was, it 100% lived up to the hype. One of the areas that we're ranking ballparks on is the architecture, and from the iconic red brick to, of course, the ivy to the most iconic of marquees on the front, this ballpark really set the standard for this new generation of ballparks. When many cities got away from the multi-use facilities like the Astrodome and started building smaller, more intimate ballparks, they looked to Wrigley Field for the example, and the example is right there because again, so much of it, people know this ballpark, even if they've never watched a baseball game in their life. They know the ivy on the wall, and they know the marquee. They know it because it is such a part of America. So even if you're not a baseball fan, you really should visit and, again, take the tour. Now, in regards to amenities, of course, you're not going to have the exact same ballpark experience with brand new amenities and all that fun stuff, in part because the ballpark's not brand new. But they've done a really good job of using what little space they have in adding some of the things that we have come to expect. There's a bunch of different kinds of bars, there's a bunch of different kinds of food. And so even though you have a narrow concourse with which to deal and move around, they've still done a really good job of updating the experience so it feels not too dissimilar to some of the newer parks you might visit. I love their use of technology and how they use their scoreboard because it's a nice combination of new and updated. They have 2 video boards, you're getting the new stats, you're getting all that fun stuff, but to straightaway center, you have a beautiful and iconic hand-operated scoreboard that takes you back to baseball in the 1910s. Again, if you take the tour, you'll find out exactly why the 2 video boards are where they are. and it's got to do with money. And if we're looking at historical significance, it doesn't get better than this. I mean, so much about baseball and baseball's history took place in these walls. And, you know, no one knows if Babe Ruth really did call a shot, or was he pointing to a friend in the dugout? Nobody knows. But sometimes in baseball, the legend's better than the truth, so you print the legend. And so that's where that happened, or supposedly happened. So much baseball history happened on that field. And the ivy that you're seeing is the original ivy that dies every fall and comes back, and it's ready to go, just like we are when it's time for baseball season. So when we rate the history of Wrigley Field, it does absolutely max out our score, because it's important historically, not just to baseball, but also it's a very important part of Americana. And finally, the game day experience. It doesn't start when you get in the gate. It starts when they block off Wrigley Field. You've got bars open, you've got fathers and sons playing catch, you've got people selling merch, people are drinking, people are having a good time. They've got a splashboard thing. When I was there, they had a live band. They do a great job of putting on a party well before the gates open that lasts well after the final out. And the atmosphere inside the ballpark is crazy. There were 35,000 fans in the ballpark on the Tuesday night and Wednesday afternoon that we went. They stayed till the end. They're in on every pitch. Singing "Go Cubs Go" when they got the win was honestly super cool and kind of infectious. And so it's as good a baseball game day experience out there as you can find. And so as a result, looking at all of this and averaging everything out, we give Wrigley Field a 4.5 out of 5 ice cream helmets. And we're not done talking Wrigley Field or the Chicago Cubs. We're very excited to welcome Jeff, Mr. Candid Cubs himself, from Bricks Behind the Ivy. Stay tuned. We're excited to welcome Jeff Rogowskis to Ballpark Nation. He is from Bricks Behind the Ivy, one of my favorite baseball podcasts. Jeff, okay, so I went. It was awesome.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all. Wrigley Field is one of the most magical places on the entire earth. It's like that, you know, that old joke on The Big Bang Theory with Sheldon Cooper, and he has that one spot in the room, and they refer to it at times as like his point of origin, like 0-0 on the graph for you math nerds out there. That's what Wrigley Field is for me. And I get like my batteries recharged, and then I can, you know, continue being a person in any other regard because Wrigley gives me life.
Do you have like a specific moment when you remember becoming a Cubs fan?
Yeah, I think I have a pretty standard Cubs story. The only thing a little non-standard about it is probably, you know, where I grew up. I'm in the south suburbs, which is kind of the heart of Sox country. And I'm what a lot of Cub fans might refer to as a cradle Cub fan. I was raised by Cub fans, and the blue blood was passed down by genetics. And I spent a lot of time in my grandmother's house as a kid, and she always had WGN on, and you know, the voices of Steve Stone and Harry Carey are just as much family to me as now, you know, Pat and Ron Coomer, and before him, Pat and Ron Santo on the radio. So it's something that's always been around, and I kind of gravitated to it just for, I guess, like additional connection to, you know, the adults in my family, and just seeing the passion and the interest in this thing like really drew me to it. And I wanted really badly to be part of that conversation as quick as I could. I have two kids. I have my oldest son is a World Series kid. His name is Kyle, after Kyle Hendricks, who is still one of my favorite Cubs players.
Was there like a baby boom in Chicago 9 months after the World Series? All these kids were born.
I'm sure there was some stories about it. Mine's not technically a true World Series baby in that regard. My wife is a big Cubs fan as well, and we had season tickets still at that point that year, and we had gone closer to opening day, and my wife gave me this little mitt and a pregnancy test during the seventh inning stretch of a baseball game, and my first reaction was like, who dropped this? Like, you took some kid's glove. Like, I had not processed the moment because I was singing the seventh inning stretch, you know, with the crowd. And then I realized that we were going to have a kid. And everything changes a little bit then, your priorities shift, and the panic sets in as that first time fatherhood uh idea starts to trickle in. But as the season went on, I'd made a joke in the moment when she had told me, it's like, well, if they win the World Series, I get to name the kid, because like the odds were forever in her
Greatest bet for
favor.
your wife ever, right? Like,
Yeah,
sure, go
exactly.
ahead.
And as the closer we got, like I was like, all right, he's gonna be Javier Aroldis Fragauskas. What do you think? As kind of things got closer and closer, we had Kyle Hendricks is just the embodiment of perseverance, and I really enjoyed that. He is a player that has never had elite velocity, but he has elite command. He's an Ivy League grad, one of the more successful Ivy League players in the history of the game, and he started Game 6 of the NLCS, the clincher for the pennant, and he started Game 7 of the World Series. So it became, you know, it became very obvious that that was what we were going to pick. And his middle name is actually Anthony, after Anthony Rizzo, and that's an ode to just his large amount of charity work in the Chicago area and the children's hospitals. Just really wanted to indoctrinate like those two values with those players into my kids. So yeah, I think the Cub fandom here has been a slow start. It's something that I have tried. No one ever told me to like baseball. So I've
Right.
never really been like, hey, you have to go do this activity with me. So it's trying to be, that balance of wanting so badly for them to participate with this in me, and then also like introduce them in an area where they can gravitate to it, instead of making it something that is a requirement, regardless how much I feel it's a requirement. We've gone twice now as a whole family. As having gone now yourself, Wrigley is one of the more expensive tickets in town. So family of four is, that's a once a year event. And
Yeah.
my kids are 5 and 7. I can't remember if I stated it. My youngest daughter is named Erin, and she has enjoyed baseball, I think, more than her older brother. And I think she is kind of gravitating to this is how to get more quality time with dad. And a big entrant for her this year, hats off to MLB The Show, and including a creative player mode in which you can make a female baseball player. And she just, when she saw the ad for that, because she knows how much I love baseball and baseball video games, she saw the advertisement for this and she went bananas. She thought it was so cool. So I scanned her face into the game, and we picked like all like the pink gloves and like all the little accessories, and made her look as much like my daughter as she could. And that's something we do, at least once a week. We hop into the game, and I turn the difficulty way down, and she plays as herself. And
Oh,
then that's usually immediately followed by the need to go to the front yard and play t-ball and pretend that she's doing the things that she did in the game.
baseball's this weird game where history lives on top of the present, and it's almost like some of your favorite players might even be players that died before you were born. Any players like that?
For me, it's Ernie Banks, and it has everything to do with just how much I know my grandma loved Ernie Banks. And then, second is Ron Santo, and just because of how much I knew my dad loved Ron Santo. Those are players that I never saw play. I never really heard their stories, until I was a little bit older and read books and such about them. But Ernie Banks was such an ambassador for the Chicago Cubs until he passed, in the more recent years. And Ron Santo, he was the epitome of a diehard fan in that radio booth with Pat Hughes. And when they lost, you felt how destroyed he felt. And when they won, you felt how happy he was. And it was it was too bad that he ended up entering the Hall of Fame after he died. It would have been something I think he would have cherished forever. I'm glad he got to experience his number being retired while he was still alive. And I have a just beyond here for those who are watching this. I have a call, I call it my Cubs Hall of Fame, and it's players that mean something to me get inducted. And I'm sure if you contacted these players, they would say it's a higher honor than the actual Hall of Fame. Once finding out that they're in a basement in Tinley Park, Illinois. But I've got Ron Santo, and and I've got Ernie Banks.
I think baseball doesn't get enough credit for having good rivalries. I don't know how much you follow college sports, but around the time of this recording, the Longhorns stole the Aggies baseball coach. And it's a big deal because it's a big rivalry.
Yes.
They think it's a big
especially because
rivalry.
of his post game comments of
Yeah,
he's
there's
never
that.
leaving.
The Cardinal Cub thing, how intense is it really?
I would say it's pretty intense. I haven't run into a ton of Cardinals fans in my life, given I'm not near St. Louis. But when I have run into Cardinals fans, you know, I've talked a lot of trash about the Cardinals. And the good news is that I am just old enough that a lot of that trash isn't on the internet. So like I can come into these interactions pretty clean. But there is a little bit of an air. And I think a lot of it reminds me very much. I am a college sports fan. I went to Valparaiso University, which is was put on the map by Bryce Drew hitting a shot in 1997. And we always, when I was on campus, our rival was Butler. But like to Butler, we weren't their rival because they were busy like actually winning basketball games and
Right,
going
right.
to the national championship twice with Brad Stevens. And I think that's the same with the Cubs Cardinals, at least in my Cubdom lifetime. The Cardinals have been a mainstay near the top of the National League Central for the better part of 2 decades.
Yeah.
And everyone in Chicago refers to every player that gets called up by them that you've never heard of as Cardinal Devil Magic, because they always have some guy that's not on a prospect list that comes up and is at minimum a replacement level major league player, which is really hard to do.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's so it has to come from a lens of jealousy of, man, look at this sustained success. And I think that edge kind of grows a little bit again as this year the Cubs are struggling, and maybe a perception of missing a window or not being in a window since the 2016 team, and realizing how difficult it is to maintain success. So then you just go back to hating the thing that you don't understand. And that would be just the persistence and constant success of the organization down south.
One of the things that I kind of thought was neat is how much the World Series was still very much embraced. And I think the t-shirt I saw was, what if I told you like 18 minutes of rain could erase 100 and some years of tear for whatever it was. But I mean, and it's always a weird spot to be, like, where um some fan bases might be like, you win a championship, you put the stuff away, but how much does that still matter to you?
It's tough. I go back and forth because I think I knew it changed everything. There was this burden lifted, and like the emotional response the moment it happened, it felt bigger than me. Like I felt like all of my family members who had been, maybe not as intense of a fan as I was, but very dialed in, and all the family members or friends and who have family members, and all the stories of listening with their dad at the graveyard at Game 7. Like there's so many stories like that because it meant so much. And not to bring up MLB the Show again, there was that commercial for one of the versions of the games where they were doing their "So Real It's Unreal" campaign, and it was just showing the Cubs win the World Series. And it turns out it was just some guy in Wrigleyville in his apartment playing the video game, and he's just like sitting there on his couch and he's crying. And after they'd shown all this like imagery of an old man finally like cutting his beard, and like a nun and a priest like embracing, and like the city like just the streets filled. And yeah, I think the World Series parade in Chicago has been stated as like the seventh largest gathering of human beings in the history of the planet that we know.
Wow.
So, and I remember walking in Wrigleyville after the parade and running into people who are like, I drove all night here from Florida, like to be for this parade. And like me
Wow.
thinking I was a big deal because like I was there at 4 a.m., like sitting on the street corner with my buddy. It's like they've been in a car 18 hours to be in the spot that I'm in. And yeah, it's just Cub fans are unbelievable.
What would you tell somebody that, they're going to Wrigley for the first time? What would you tell them, some things to look for or make sure they do to really get that full Wrigley experience?
Yeah, I think something that's gotten popular around, Major League Baseball in general is like those like first time visitors stations and stuff. I would definitely check that out. Like get your passport, your baseball ballpark book stamped, or get the certificate. It's your first visit to Wrigley Field. Because it does really feel special to have something like that for Wrigley. For me, it really is just like absorbing what's different about the ballpark. You're not going to find the score anywhere besides the manual scoreboard in center field, which to me is very, very important because I think the attention to that scoreboard, which is probably, I mean, if you asked me tomorrow, the answer might be different, but probably my favorite feature of Wrigley. I have a big replica of it on my Hall of Fame wall over there, and over here, obviously, you see the marquee, which is another thing that I think is iconic to Wrigley. And like to me, the ballpark too feels different. Like when you go to a day game versus going to a night game, because
Sure.
like a night game still feels pretty foreign. Like considering they're the last to get there to actually have night games at Wrigley Field, and the city and the since it's nestled in the middle of a neighborhood, there's just been a long standing like fights and such about the noise ordinance and the number of night games are allowed. And the Cubs have had like trade-off games to have concerts and stuff because like they have only a number of events that they can have per their agreement with the neighborhood that have certain noise levels and go like a certain amount of time. So it's different. Like it's like two different ballparks, like night and day, no pun intended. And the stuff around the ballpark looks different. So yeah, I guess like if you're going to Wrigley Field, like the important things are depending on the type of information, how you process the baseball game, there's different places to look for it and figuring that out. Like the left field video board is going to have a lot of your statistics on it.
Yeah.
Right field video board is going to have usually like MPH. That's where they put like launch angle, batting order, scoring, official scoring rules will end up on that right field board. And there's usually like there's two panels, like electronic panels, on the upper deck on the sides, and there's velo and smaller statistics there. But if you're looking for the score at Wrigley, there's only one place to look, and it's the best place to look, and that's the scoreboard in center field.
And now on to close it out, the right-hander from Houston, Texas, Jim Christopher.
And that wraps up this episode of Ballpark Nation. Thanks for hanging out with us for some baseball goodness. You see, baseball brings out the best in all of us. It brings out that inner child. So I say this, whether you're 4 or 14 or 40, bring your mitt to the next game because you never know if you're going to get that foul ball or that home run. Grab some cotton candy. I don't care how sticky it makes you. You'll be happier. And so that way you know when to come back to the next game, get one of those iconic pocket schedules. Because whether it's your first game or your 100th, the feeling you get when you leave the ballpark is always, I can't wait to get back. And as for us, we'll meet you behind home plate for some more baseball next week. And until then, I'm Jim Christopher, and we'll see you at the ballpark.
Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks. I don't care if I ever get back, 'cause it's root for the home team. They don't win, it's a shame, 'cause it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the